I was a sergeant in the New York City Police Department, and I worked in the Organized Crime Control Bureau, the Auto Crime Division.
And I was a sergeant in the Auto Crime Division, the Organized Crime Control Bureau.
At the time, I was working nights, so I was at home. I received a call about 8:30 from my mother, and again, it's 20 years ago, and it seems at times like yesterday. But she called up and she said a plane crashed into one of the towers. I put the TV on. I see the second plane come in. At that point, they pretty much hung up the phone and said, "I got to go to work."
You saw the news clips of, the first plane hitting it. I called my lieutenant that was back at the Auto Crime base and looking for further instructions. I told him I was going to take my driver and go to the towers. And he said, absolutely not, that he had 50 detectives in the building in uniform and no supervisors, that my orders were to get back to the Auto Crime base in Queens.
It was a bright sunny day, and it was about 1 in the afternoon. And you can see how dark it was, because it was just, there was nothing left. It was just probably about a foot of soot and debris. It was just surreal. Felt like you were on a movie set.
And if you've ever walked out in a fresh snowstorm and the wet snow stuck to your shoes, that's what was happening on 9/11 when we were walking down that street.
As a lot of people know, as soon as the towers came down, a lot of the communications were restricted. So a lot of the cell phones weren't working. And
we didn't hear from my brother, so I was quite concerned. And then that night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, they had eye wash stations, because there was so much grit in the air that they would bring us into a building and clean out your eyes with saline solution. And I was on one line. I looked over to the fire department line. I could see my brother was there, so I knew he was good.
I just remember coming in, and you can actually see other off-duty officers coming in, because, and we had a detective go commandeer a MTA bus, and that was Ed, and we brought the bus over to the base, and we went over as a unit. The pile, you had over 100-story buildings come down, and the pile was no more than 30 or 40 feet, and you would think you would see desks, computers, chairs. You saw nothing. It was just a pile of steel and dust.
We were on the pile, different assignments, doing what they called the dig, and trying to remove as much material as we could to see if anybody was trapped underneath the pile. So I did that on some days. We did escorts on other days. Some of the detectives were assigned to the morgue, and they were trying to identify bodies that were recovered from the pile. We opened up the landfill up in Staten Island, where they moved all of the vehicles, all the fire trucks, all the ambulances, and all the police vehicles. And like Kevin said, there was multiple garages in those buildings, underground garages, that had thousands of cars in them that had to be moved to Staten Island.
We were up there probably for about 4 months, and we would await the vehicles to get delivered there. And we, at that time, again in 2001, we were working with members of NICB. We set up a trailer on site, and we just cataloged all of the vehicles that were coming. At times you couldn't tell whether it was a car or not. When you would look around it, and you would look for distinguishable parts. And then once we would catalog it, we'd take pictures of it, and we would move it over. But at the end of it, there was probably, I would say, 1,100 or 1,200 vehicles.
The beginning months after there wasn't a plane that would go overhead that you wouldn't really take a double stare at when you were driving. Instead of just glancing up, you'd say, okay, is that plane all right? And the reason, I guess, for my thing was on November 12th, a month after the 9/11 attacks. I was on my way to the landfill with 3 other detectives, and I was the supervisor, and the plane went down in Bell Harbor and crashed. So I was one of the first sergeants on the scene for that.
It keeps you, you're a little more vigilant as to your surroundings, what's going around, and what could happen in an instant. So you got to live for today.
One thing I think that kept some of us going, or a lot of us going, on the West Side Highway, a bunch of residents from Lower Manhattan had like a candlelight vigil. They were lining the FDR with candles and everything. And they were thanking everybody for their support. And when police get backing from the public, they will do anything for that public.
I'd be remiss if I didn't speak to the volunteers. As we were down there, we had volunteers from around the country and frankly around the world that came in, gave their support, provided meals for us. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the memorial and the museum that's down there now. And I would recommend anybody who visits New York to go down there, because it's a beautiful memorial. The thing they say is never forget.